Hello everyone, I hope you're well, and today I'm going to be having a bit of a chat about some cosplay essentials. These are things that I find really useful when making costumes or cosplaying or anything like that. And a lot of these things, they certainly changed how I approached cosplay and just the efficiency, I suppose, as well. Being able to reuse items or having some of these essentials just made my job, my life a little bit easier. Just keep in mind essentials are probably going to change depending what kind of cosplayer or costume maker you are. If you're more fantasy based, you may have certain things that are really good essentials for that. If you're more into superheroes or if you're more into anime, it's going to vary depending on what kind of genre or what aesthetic you like to go for. So what I've tried to do is almost curate a few things that would suit a few of those different topics and just some really important general ones that I think are really useful when making costumes. Now, I have certainly done a mix of costumes throughout all of my cosplay years. I think I've been cosplaying for almost 11, 12 years now. So I've kind of gone through waves of different things and genres. Right now I tend to focus more on fantasy and superheroes. First thing I'm going to chat about are boots. These guys, got these little handsome ones here. They've got some leather straps on them, which I've used recently for my Thor costume. And then one of my favorite pair of boots are these ones here. They're just the ones that zip up on the side and then you just tie them around as well. I have used these for so many different costumes, superhero, fantasy, everything. They're just really fantastic. I love the look of high boots especially. I think one of the things when it comes to cosplaying that can be a bit tricky is always what to do with your feet, whether it's to keep it accurate or for comfort as well. I really like kind of knee-high or thigh-high boots especially, just because I think they're really flattering, but they also are really good if you are wearing any kind of leg or thigh armor. Then you can kind of wrap it around the boots, or you can safety pin it, or you can always tack it to it as well. It just makes it really easy to keep everything together and making it look cohesive as well. If you're really lucky and you have a kind of common shoe size, you may be able to find some from an op shop. I've definitely done that before, and then you can kind of really go ahead and even directly glue armor pieces to them, which I find really handy, not having to worry about fastenings. Otherwise, I tend to get mine from, we have a cheaper place called Rivers that I can go to in Australia, or even just online. I found some pretty decent boots through AliExpress. They're not amazing quality, but because I tend to only wear a lot of these boots for costumes or for kind of fairs or conventions or anything, I'm not using them every day, so they don't need to be perfect quality. The next thing I'm going to chat about is very fantasy based, and that is pouches, belts, all of those fantastic things. First one I'm going to show is this one here. As you can see, I've got some little potion bottles. These are just from the cheap store, and I've put some little sticks. We've got salt, some tea, and just some dried flowers. And then I've just got it on this belt, again from an op shop that I painted. I love playing with these, especially if you're doing any kind of like fantasy, Viking, medieval, D&D. Belts and accessories and pouches and fun little things on your belts can just really transform a look. I feel like I'm definitely someone who just loves detail. I love just having so many different things to look at, and I really think it makes the photos really special if you have lots of details. So this is one way that I just love to add a little bit of extra. Just having things like these are really fantastic. And then in terms of the pouches, again, just such a really great basic for any kind of costume to have some little pouches on the side. Pouches, they're not the hardest thing to make, but they're not always the easiest. They can be a bit tedious sometimes, but it's kind of great knowing that putting the effort into these just means that I've used them so many different times for different costumes. I just think they're such an essential, especially if you are going for that fantasy aesthetic. One thing you'll notice as well is I have kind of a bunch of these little different charms hanging off of the pouches as well. On this one here, I've got a little brooch, and then I've got it's kind of like a long tooth charm, again, found it in an op shop. Just adding almost these like magical artifacts and interesting things, definitely having a look at op shops for their jewelry. You can find some really interesting pieces, and even if you don't love it right away, you can always paint them. That's another thing I love doing. You know, even just kind of interesting pieces, painting them gold or just adding some kind of red detailing as well. I just love putting these on my costumes. They add a bit of kind of, you know, a bit of a flair, a bit of elegance depending what you're cosplaying. Another thing I really love about those is that if you are someone who loves to do kind of original looks, you know, jewelry can be a really great way again to kind of just lift up that costume a little bit more, maybe kind of fit into the setting or the aesthetic that you're playing with. You know, I love kind of using like necklaces, you know, chokers, or kind of like layering necklaces, even having them as like headpieces as well, can just really add to the overall look of different things. Again, op shops are going to be your best friend. Even if something kind of isn't your style, pulling things apart, putting things together, painting them can really change it. And it's just a really affordable and guess eco-friendly way as well, because you're reusing these bits and pieces. Talking about op shops, I definitely have to mention different types of props and just interesting items you can find. One of the things when it comes to cosplaying, especially when you're doing like original looks or original characters, or even just you're looking to kind of add another element to a character costume, having props, especially to pose with, is just really fantastic. Adds another interest. It means you can generally do some really nice kind of action shots as well, which is what I really love. I am an avid op shopper, so you know, you're not always going to find something in the first go, but if you have a couple around you, definitely check them out every now and then, see what they have. I've gotten a few really interesting pieces. I have this wonderful, definitely haunted lantern. I just love being able to shoot with this. Again, holding a lantern and taking that photo. You know, I can edit in a flame, I can kind of play with the lighting. It just makes it really interesting. Candlesticks as well, another thing you can't really go wrong with. And you know, just fun little props as well. This is for some upcoming Halloween fun and I plan to reuse it for several different things. So I think having a look at props, whether you're looking online or even better on op shops, it's just a really handy thing. I feel like they're such an essential if you are looking to kind of boost your photos or just your costume just that little bit more. I know I always feel a little bit more comfortable posing with something as well. Sometimes I struggle, you know, where do I put my hands when I'm posing or anything like that. If I have something to hold, it makes it so much easier, and that definitely has to do with if the character does have any canon props as well. You know, gotta have the good old sword. Again, this is maybe a little bit more specific to me just because I love my fantasy characters. This is just a really cheap foam sword that I bought online. I have made plenty that I can use as well, but if you're kind of not as comfortable making them, you can find some pretty reasonable ones. Even if you get a more cheaper one, you can always add stuff to it, you know, adding leather straps, repainting it, adding some darker details, or even weathering it can really make a difference from it kind of looking a little bit cheaper and then a little bit more fitting in with the rest of your costume. Moving on, and this is probably quite an obvious one, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Try and reuse your wigs as much as you can. I know that's not always possible if you have a very specific style or a colour that really only suits one character, but trying to do this as much as possible. Again, it's just in terms of like efficiency, but also affordability, and just, you know, reusing things you have. Nowadays that I do cosplay a lot of superheroes, they all kind of have, you know, natural hair colors, and I do a lot of femme versions of them, so I'm able to reuse a lot of my different wigs as well. I did invest in a few really nice lace front wigs where they kind of sit really lovely. You know, I've got a dark brown one which I use for so many different characters, and just by, you know, tying half of it up, adding some braids, curling it, you can actually get a lot of different looks with it. So always keep that in mind. You know, if you think, oh, I'd love to cosplay this character and I already have a really good wig for it, but it's not quite right, how can you kind of, you know, style it to make it suit it nicely? I definitely don't think lace front wigs are essential because I know they can be a little bit more expensive. However, I feel like if you are planning to cosplay a lot of different characters that have that similar style, maybe have a look at investing in it. That way you're buying kind of one better wig instead of maybe three not as good wigs, and then you know, you have those wigs and then you might not know what to do with them afterwards. Moving on, and I have a couple of different little accessories that I think are really useful. One of the first thing is getting a pack of these cheaper headbands. These are just the little wire ones I've got here. I don't know how many times I'm so thankful I bought these, where I just randomly need to attach something to my hair. And again, I love reusing my wigs, so if I can attach it to a headband rather than the wig itself, then I'll go ahead and do that. I can always, you know, cover the band up with hair or even just Photoshop it out. But these are just so handy, whether you have ears or horns or just, you know, a random accessory or a bow or anything, just makes it so much easy. Again, efficiency, the fact that when you're getting ready, you can get the hair, get the wig on, whatever you're doing, and just plop this guy on to go. It's already nice and adjusted to however you wanted it to be. The next thing is all of the connections and fastening for your costumes. I think one of the things I struggled with the most when I first started cosplaying was finding a way to attach different things to myself, whether it be capes or armor or accessories or anything like that, because you want it to sit nicely, especially when I used to attend conventions. I didn't want to adjust, so I wanted it to sit as almost perfectly as it could be, and it was through a lot of trial and error and looking online that I kind of figured out my way around it. I can do a whole separate video on that later, but the essentials, first of all, just these little buckles. You've seen these probably everywhere. These are fantastic. You can sew one side, for example, to a shirt, the other side to a cape. Like heavier belts or armor or anything. These are just so fantastic, really inexpensive and super easy to use. Following that, you also have D-rings. These I tend to use mostly for armor. What I'll do is I'll attach one to either side of, say, of a gauntlet, and then I will use a strip of fabric to then thread it through and tighten it together. I always really like these as well because it means that I can kind of adjust things. If I want it a bit tighter, a bit looser, I can work with it. And then the best friends of these guys is also Velcro. Now, some people have a bit of a love-hate with Velcro. I do use it quite a lot. I have both the adhesive one and also the sewing ones. Honestly, if it's on armor, I'll just use hot glue just to make sure it's fully attached. You can use Velcro on sewing as well. The only thing I would suggest though is that if you are looking for like a stronger bond, would actually be to use some snaps instead, just because you can sew these down and they tend to stay together, especially if you've got two forces pulling against it. The snaps are going to hold out a little bit better than the Velcro. But I love Velcro. When I attend conventions, I tend to take a little bit with me just in case as well. It's always in my little cosplay medical kit, just because Velcro is so easy to use and it's just such a great tool for cosplayers. Alrighty, moving on to a little bit of clothing. Things that I find really useful. The very first thing, a little bit random, but leather pants. Leather pants that are comfortable, and I have this pair that I have used so many times. Currently it has some snaps on it because I've used it for Siri recently. Again, a lot of fantasy characters, superhero characters tend to use these. So having these, even if they're not specifically leather, just some black leggings or having some base pants that are really comfortable and that you can kind of use for various different costumes is really nice. Along that vein, I also have lots of white button-up t-shirts. These are really fantastic, especially if you are doing kind of more anime costumes or even using these with corsets over them if you are doing more of a fantasy look. Just having some ones that you really love and are comfortable. I'm pretty certain all of these are from op shops. They always have a lot of white button-up shirts, you know, black ones, different colors, whatever you're looking for. Having a few of these ready to go whenever I need them is really good. Speaking of corsets as well, this is maybe again a little bit more specific, but if you are someone who does love that kind of medieval vibe, having a few different corsets around can be really lovely, especially if you are looking to do more of an original look, and I can just use those throughout various costumes. You know, I use them for Siri, for Jester is what I first originally bought some of them for, and I know that I'm going to get a lot of use out of them as well. I know I've chatted about op shops a lot, but I do love them, and to find some unique pieces as well, especially clothing for again, original characters or even some bases for some costumes as well is really fantastic. You know, I've picked up a few really wonderful ones. I'll kind of see something a little bit interesting that I might not have seen before. You know, I've got this top here, which I think would be a lovely kind of royal Siri look. This was another one I actually used for another Siri look as well. Again, just kind of these interesting colors and textures that I think would photograph really nicely. It's just such a great way, without having to kind of purchase anything too expensive or worry that I'm kind of buying too much and only using them a few times. I don't necessarily feel as guilty if I am buying from an op shop, just because I know I'm not always going to wear this, but the fact that I'm not buying something brand new, and then, you know, if I do end up putting this back to the op shop, I'm not going to feel too bad about it. Another thing that I really loved having, and I started getting especially for my D&D costumes, is elf ears. These guys are fantastic. These are just the really cheap ones. They just kind of clip onto your ear like that, and they hang out there. They don't look amazing if you go super close, but if you style a wig over it, these guys look really fantastic. You can see I've kind of blinged these ones up. These are my taco elf ears. And again, I've kind of reused these for so many different looks after the fact. Another just general item that I love having around are some gloves. These are just some fingerless gloves that I initially got for Yasha and then have just continued using, you know, for so many different things. They just go on like that. They're nice and long. I can, you know, always cuff them a little bit if I want them to be shorter. Again, I've just found that I've used these for so many different costumes since. I have these in black, and I also have them in white, just because, again, they're such a fantastic essential. Now moving on to some other things that will help kind of enhance your cosplays. I'm gonna have a really quick chat about makeup. I have done a video all about different makeup techniques and things you can use, so I'll leave that up there if anyone's interested. But a really quick little recap. I definitely think having a makeup palette, especially an eyeshadow palette that just has various colours, is really good to have a look at. I've got this one here. It's got a lot of the base colours that I tend to use. Having one that, you know, has a few different colours means that if you are kind of more into makeup, you can play with it and you can have a bit of fun with characters as well then. Or if you're doing eyebrow colours or contouring or highlighting, having a really good base one, and you can get so many different ones nowadays, is just really handy. I think I'd always say invest in a slightly larger palette, especially if you're newer to cosplay. And then if you find yourself kind of using specific colours or shades or anything, maybe you can then look into having a look at some more specific coloured palettes as well. In terms of brushes, again, this is going to vary depending how much you enjoy doing makeup or you're having a look at. If you're kind of new to it, I pretty much always suggest get a really nice fluffy brush. These are fantastic for blending. If you're kind of working with different colours or you're a little bit new, you can't really go wrong with blending. I also have this one, which is double-sided, which has the eyebrow pencil, which is what I use to fill in my brows, and then just a smaller one as well, which I like to add a bit of colour to my lower lash line. Changing the shape of your brows and the shape of your eyes can really kind of make you look like a different character, or if you're trying to, you know, imitate a look of an actress or an actor, it's definitely something to look at. Or even if you're just having a bit of fun with it, these are really fantastic tools. And then I just also have this little kind of, it's a slightly fluffy, flatter brush. This I use a lot for contouring. If you are looking to do a little bit more contouring or anything, definitely having a look at one of these brushes is the way to go. I also really like having eyeliner. I think this is, again, a really good base for people. Even if you're not that familiar, it's a really great thing to play around with. But again, it can kind of help do the eye shape that you're looking for. If it's more cat-eyed or kind of more of the like sad anime look, you can definitely have a bit of a play with these. In terms of tools, I feel like I have to mention the hot glue gun. I mean, you know, it's one of my favorite tools. I'm sure many cosplayers out there love their hot glue gun. Not that hot glue gun can replace everything, you know, sometimes hand sewing is certainly the way to go if you don't have a machine, but I just feel like hot glue gun can be such a lifesaver in a pinch. You know, when I first started cosplaying, the first couple of years, I couldn't sew for anything. I could barely hand sew, and I just got through with a hot glue gun. You know, there's a lot you can actually do with them, and there's a lot of different techniques, and nowadays there's so many fantastic online forums where you can have a bit of a look at, you know, utilizing what you have around you. You know, nowadays I have a Dremel, I have a heat gun, and I love those tools, but when I first started, I just had a hot glue gun, and that managed to be fine. If you are looking to maybe get into more of the prop area, or even if you're like, you know, adding some trim and you want to hot glue it, you know, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. I ain't gonna judge you, I've done that and I still do it from time to time. Hot glue guns are super easy. Most of the cheap stores around me have various, you know, the larger ones. You can get really cheap ones for like $10. Don't expect them to necessarily last forever, but again, they're fantastic in a pinch, and especially if you're getting started. You know, cheap stores, they have like foam as well if you are looking to do more props. Again, hot gluing trim, you know, sometimes there's lots of things you can do with it. The very last thing I'll add in is maybe not an essential for true beginners of cosplay, but it was something that I really loved having as I got more into taking photos, especially taking photos of myself, and that was having some nice backdrops. Now, you can get some really fantastic backdrops online. When I first started, I couldn't quite afford them, so what I did was I would go to my craft store and I would just get a lot of fleece. Now, quite often fleece will be on sale in a lot of the stores around me, so I could get quite a lot without having to pay too much. The reason I love fleece is that you don't necessarily have to worry about ironing it a whole lot. If you are someone who does use Photoshop, you can always, you know, get out the creases really easily. Or if you don't have access to that, it can even just having it hang for a little bit can help get rid of any of the creases. When I first started and before I had a proper stand, I used to just pin this to my bookcase. It sounds a bit bizarre, but I have a very small space in here, so I would pin it to my bookcase and then pin it to my wall, let it hang down, and then that's how I took a lot of my photos. I feel like it's such a great thing if you are wanting more of a neutral background. One thing I would do later on is add flowers or draping fabric or anything just to spice it up a little. But if you have a chance, go have a look at your local craft store, see if they have any fleece on sale or anything. You know, even if you're just doing waist up to first start off, you really don't need that much. You know, and you can use a window as natural lighting, or if you do have any ring lights, you know, having a play with just a neutral background is such a fantastic thing, and such an essential when I really started getting into taking my own photographs. Alrighty, I know I kind of went rapid fire through it, but I had a lot of ideas I wanted to share with you guys. Let me know if you have any tips. I think what I'll do next is a advanced cosplay essentials video, maybe have a bit of a chat about body paint and some other bits and pieces. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!